morning.
And rise and Eisenhower and shine, America.
Today we have many topics to discuss. It is the 1950s, and it most certainly is a good morning. America has battled out of the Great Depression, experienced triumphant victory in World War II. America is now surging toward an era of economic prosperity and military greatness, once again reestablishing and reproving America's state as a dominant world power.
In our latest domestic news, Dwight D. Eisenhower has successfully defeated Adlai E. Stevenson in the 1952 election, crushing him in 442 electoral votes to 89. Many of you may know him as the beloved general from World War II, but now you will become familiar with him as the Republican president who favors limited military spending, the New Deal, and increased highway construction.
With Eisenhower's victory, this makes California Senator Richard Milhouse Nixon the vice president.
That's all thanks to his checkers speech. I mean, if it wasn't for that self-pitying speech on television in response to the allegations to him tapping into slush funds while in Congress, I doubt Eisenhower would have even put him on the ticket.
Just goes to show you what kind of leverage and popularity that comes with the increasing amount of television sets in the average American home.
Well, speaking of televisions, it's becoming very popular nowadays for the average American to have one in their home.
Oh, I know. Such a great invention. With such high quality, you can watch anything from televangelists such as Billy Graham, Pentecostal holiness preacher Oral Roberts, and Roman Catholic Fulton J. Sheen.
But don't forget Elvis and his scandalizing pelvis.
It certainly is a consumer era between TVs, having McDonald's popping up everywhere. Kaylin!
But they're so good! Oh well. Oh, but we can't forget about the most magical place on earth, Disneyland.
What a time to be alive, if I do say so myself.
Indeed it is. Oh my, it's already time for Women's Corner. Take it away, Isabella.
Hello, I'm here to offer advice out there to the average woman of the 1950s. Ladies, from Marilyn Monroe and her perfectly curved hips, leading new body standards, to the 30 million new clerical jobs made available for us, and now the feminist mystique, published by Betty Friedman, supposedly launching a modern feminist movement in our society, and then popular shows like Leave It to Beaver, which remind us of the typical standard of what a good housewife is. This is all set by the cult of domesticity. Now, the new expectations of this era can be confusing, but we must remember our role is in the house to maintain a family and be a good wife.
Wow, inspiring. Now that brings us to our next section, sports.
Many beloved sports teams are making the move from the Northeast to the West and South. Both the Brooklyn Dodgers and the LA Giants relocated to San Francisco, which signifies the substantial expansion for not only baseball, but also basketball and football.
Man, it must be nice and warm down there in LA and San Francisco.
Which leads us to the weather. Take it away, guys!
That's right, Isabella. We are in the middle of a heated war with Russia, bringing us to this chilly front.
You mean the Cold War?
That's right, friend. Or should I say, comrade.
Don't let Joseph McCarthy hear you say that. That Wisconsin Republican senator who was, in his defense, a triumphant war hero, accused Dean Akinson of knowingly employing 205 Communist Party members. However, there are only 57 actual communists that were employed, and he didn't root out one name. And with the Republican victory of Eisenhower in 1952, McCarthy's accusations have become even bolder. This can only lead to an atmosphere of suspicion and fear in regards to the Cold War.
Well, this just in, and it's good news. After wrongly accusing the U.S. Army of communism, the Senate is now formally condemning him for his conduct, which means he will officially be resigning as Wisconsin Senator.
That's amazing news, but hold up, we're in another war? Didn't we just get out of the Korean War? That brutal and futile fight lasted 3 years and cost tens of billions of dollars and 54,000 American lives.
Never mind the millions of lives from the Chinese and Koreans during this unsuccessful stalemate for the end of the spread of communism.
And now we're in a fight with Russia?
Indirectly we are. It's capitalism versus communism. Both of us possess an atomic bomb, but neither one of us wants to use them. It's a war of threats against one another.
So, do you think it's going to be another stalemate?
Yes, yes I do.
Does that mean we get to go inside?
Yes, yes we can.
Keelan, what are you doing?
Well, it's round 2 of the Eisenhower presidency after his win again over Stevenson. But he can't celebrate for long due to Russia's shocking scientific achievement in aerospace science with B-launch in Sputnik 1 and 2. Sputnik 2 carrying a dog.
Well, that's certainly going to rattle American self-confidence.
Oh, not to fear. The U.S. is making leaps and bounds as rocket fever sweeps the nation. Eisenhower has created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. Our determined president has directed billions of dollars currently to missile development, in addition to the expansion of education centered around science rather than the arts.
But along with all this going on, we also have many crises in the Middle East, including the Suez Canal crisis. First, the U.S. fears the Soviet Union will enter into the oil-rich Middle East. The government in Iran, influenced by the Kremlin, began to resist powers of Western companies controlling their petroleum. America responded to this by having the CIA install a youthful Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, as sort of a dictator.
This provides us with a short-term solution. It parts the sea of resentment amongst Iranians. Even messier than the Iranian situation, though, was the Suez Canal crisis. The Suez Canal was originally owned by France and Britain. However, President Nasser of Egypt, an ardent Arab nationalist, wanted money to build a dam on the Upper Nile due to significant need for irrigation and power.
The U.S. and Britain offered financial help, but when Nasser began to look at the ideals of communists, both nations withdrew their damn funds.
Nasser promptly regained face by nationalizing the Suez Canal. And you know what that means?
Communism!
That's right. Obviously, this outraged both nations. However, Nasser withdrew from the canal when America refused to offer any aid.
This leads to the passing of the Eisenhower Doctrine in 1957. It pledges that the U.S. would provide military and economic aid to nations in the Middle East who face the threat of communist aggression.
But in the middle of all this in the Middle East, we can't forget Vietnam. Previously, nationalists or communists wanted to throw France out of Vietnam. Vietnam, under Ho Chi Minh, was becoming increasingly communist, which, of course, the U.S. greatly opposes. In May of 1954, the French garrison was trapped in the northwest fortress of Dien Bien Phu, in which the French previously had control over. President Eisenhower decided not to strike on Vietnam after our previous conflict with Korea. However, as soon as France leaves Vietnam, we tried to take control with fear that Vietnam will spread communism.
That sounds like a mess. So, what's happening with the U.S. over in Vietnam?
Well, Vietnam is now divided into two. The communist northern section and the southern sector where they favor Western politics. We are currently residing in the southern sector. There are 2 presidents and 2 ideals over in that country.
Wow, that's almost as bad as what's happening in Cuba.
Cuba? What's going on there?
Well, Latin America began to show dissent toward the U.S. for we were neglecting their economic needs in favor of Europe's.
Well, Europe does have some pretty nice stuff over there. Have you tried their Belgian chocolate? It is to die for.
That's beside the point, Kaylin. But Latin America also didn't like the constant American intervention, especially when the CIA overthrew the leftist government in Guatemala. However, in 1959, Fidel Castro and his court overthrew the U.S.-supported government for Cuba. With this action, the U.S. cut off heavy imports of Cuban sugar.
And let me guess, they weren't happy?
You got that darn right. Cuba's leftist wing dictatorship could have possibly been a military satellite for our enemy, the Soviet Union. But in 1960, Congress authorized $5 million to prevent communism from spreading to all of Latin America.
And yet again, this is another story about why America is better than any other country in the world.
Now for our special interview with Mr. Dwight D. Eisenhower. So, Mr. President, I'm sure you're aware that President Harry Truman ended segregation in federal civil service and ordered equality of treatment and opportunity in the armed forces in 1948. However, you and Congress seem to be ignoring racial issues, causing Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren to step up to address civil rights for African Americans. How do you feel you could have taken better steps that would be more in favor of the civil rights movement?
Well, between foreign and domestic issues, there are obviously a lot of issues I gotta address. But it's vital to note, just recently, in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation in public schools was unequal and, thus, unconstitutional. This decision reversed the previous ruling in Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yes, however, southern states are opposing the ruling. Congressmen from these states signed the Declaration of Constitutional Principles in 1958, pledging their unyielding resistance to desegregation. Now, I have reports stating you do not support integration because you tend to shy away from social issues.
Well, it's difficult in these tight situations. When Orval Faubus, the governor of Arkansas, used the National Guard to prevent 9 black students from enrolling in Little Rock Central High School, I sent troops to escort the children to their classes.
Well, that's good. Further progress is sure to be made. I mean, Congress passed the first Civil Rights Act since Reconstruction days. It set up a permanent Civil Rights Commission to investigate violations of civil rights and authorized federal injunctions to protect voting rights. Also, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In addition, Southern black students formed the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which gave more focus to peaceful protesting efforts. However, now I must also ask about the incident with the American U-2 spy plane that was shot down over the Soviet Union. I mean, the U.S. did deny the true purpose of the plane, and it was only forced to admit what the real purpose was when the USSR produced the living pilot in the largely intact plane to validate the claim of being spied on airily. The incident only worsened East-West relations during the Cold War, and it was a great embarrassment for the United States.
I'm aware, but you must understand this information is highly classified.
Yes, I understand, and I mustn't mean to criticize everything, President Eisenhower. Your continuation of the New Deal programs have greatly benefited the nation, and your support of the Federal Highway Act created thousands of miles of federally funded highway and many new jobs.
Yes, these highways did much to change the economic and social structure of America. They helped businesses and families move from downtowns to suburbs.
Well, that's all we have today. Thank you.